clearly, inshallah. If you can hear me, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to today's Protect This House live webinar with Sheikh Abu Isa and Al Maghrib Institute with our special guest, Sheikh Yasser Burjas. We're very excited to kick off in a short bit with both of our instructors. And I'm just refreshing, if anyone is watching on both devices or channels or whatnot, let me know. I think you can see me, alhamdulillah, and hear me, inshallah. So once again, today's topic is the awkward years, raising righteous teens with Sheikh Abu Isa and Sheikh Yasser Burjas. We know that family can be very challenging, but there's two periods of life that are particularly testing. One is, both as a parent and as a child. One is when your kids become teenagers, and the second is when your parents start to grow old and they tend to regress and they need the support that they used to give you when you were younger. Both times have their own unique set of challenges. When your kids start to grow up and they go through that very unique time in their lives, you have puberty, you got anger issues, you got prayer, you got hijab, you have having the talk, setting clear boundaries and refiguring out the relationship that you have with them. And then, of course, as your parents start to age, then you have a new role with them. You're in charge of them while they had raised you as a child. Now you're the one who is trying to maintain respect in this changed dynamic, deal with health issues, impaired judgment, and so much more. So we know that these are things that people struggle with, are common struggles in the ummah. And alhamdulillah, we have created an entire course with Sheikh Abu Isa that tackles some of the most difficult times and stages of family life. And alhamdulillah, we've had the opportunity now to share some of that knowledge and that content with you all today through this webinar. So if you're joining us, I highly recommend, as I'm doing to my own family, share this link with them, drop it into the group chats, especially if you're coming in on YouTube. Make sure that you drop that into your WhatsApp groups, your messenger groups, etc., so that as many folks can benefit, inshallah, as possible. Mood instability, someone said in the chat, is definitely a big thing, both during the teenage years and the elderly years. The talk is technically an hour. Inshallah, we're going to try to stick to that. No promises. We'll see how things go, inshallah, but we're just kicking off. So if you're joining us now, alhamdulillah, you're joining us right at the very beginning of things. And I'm just making sure that we're all set to go before we kick off, inshallah. Once again, please continue to introduce yourselves. Let us know which corner of the world you've been able to attend from, alhamdulillah. And welcome to this first. Now, it's the first webinar in a 4-part series. So growing up and growing old is going to be the first part of the series. And then inshallah, we're going to have a second part next week as well. So we're very excited to bring in Sheikh Yasser Burjas, Sheikh Omar Suleiman, Sheikh Yasser Qadi, Ustad Taymiyyah Zubair, some of the very respected minds in the Islamic field and within Al Maghrib as well, alhamdulillah, as our instructors. Sheikh Yasser Burjas, mashallah, is originally from Palestine. For those who don't know him, he's our head of Islamic law and theory department here at Al Maghrib Institute. He's a pastoral marriage and family counselor. He's the imam of the Valley Ranch Islamic Center. And mashallah, he's graduated from Medina University with honors. He's a specialist in usul fiqh, financial literacy, and relationships. And Sheikh Abu Isa Ni'matullah is the other guy. So he's the one who's going to be doing the hosting and the talking. I can't be out here being too nice to AE. For those who don't know, I don't know what kind of disclaimer to give you. I had this very nice, mashallah introduction prepared. And then we did a little test call to make sure everything was good before this session. And the amount of absolute just humiliation I received, I was like, let me just balance things out from the very beginning. Let me just set the tone when we start this webinar. So we're doing that now, bismillah. So with that, without further ado, I'd like to bring on, inshallah, Sheikh Abu Isa Ni'matullah, our specialist, in family issues, in fiqh, and all the serious, the hard-hitting stuff, inshallah, to jump in and to begin our webinar. All right, Sheikh Abu, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. How you doing?
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shuf, Sheikh Yasser, do you see what I have to put up with? Yani, you saw that, yeah? In your life, you've never seen an introduction like that.
You know what? The last time, I recall, I have timestamps. The last time I gave you such a flowery, such a respectful introduction full of, it's just the best thing I could come up with. I got bested. I give you a good one.
Alhamdulillah, it is being recorded. Being recorded on YouTube, recorded on Facebook, recorded on Zoom. It will go on the portal. I get so attacked. Leave Hafsa alone. You bully Hafsa. You cause problems to Hafsa. Blah, blah.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. Alhamdulillah, Sheikh Yasser witnessed it with his own ears. He couldn't believe it. He nearly fainted.
300 something, 400.
This now sounds to me like a teenager actually bickering right now.
This is why, you see? I'm telling you, Sheikh. I'm telling you. Anyway, alhamdulillah. Right then, Hafsa, what's the plan, man? What's the plan?
All right, so we'll give you guys, inshallah, maybe half an hour, 45 minutes to talk, inshallah. We'd love to hear, Sheikh Yasser's, specialization in this topic and your whatever opinions that you have as well, inshallah. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. And it's going to be a juicy one. I can already feel it. Feel in my bones. Bismillah.
بارك الله فيك. جزاكم الله خير حفصة. بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. Good evening to the folks in the UK and good afternoon to all of those here on the western side of the world, so the States, Canada, and we have a few late eagles in the Middle East and towards Southeast Asia. I can see some folks that I recognize, some of the students. So big hello to everybody. And Jazakumullah khair for the opening of this year's Protect This House launch with all of its sessions. And like I wrote on social media a couple hours ago, this is one of the really nice aspects that previous students, because obviously this course has been out for a long time, and those folks that have it in their accounts, then every time that it gets relaunched, then the new sessions also get added to it. So in previous iterations, we've had sessions with some of the Maghrib instructors, all on different issues, and subhanAllah, I really enjoyed it. And this year, we are honored, mashallah, to have Sheikh Yasser Barjas kick everything off. So I'm just going to pass it over to Sheikh Yasser to introduce himself and to give salams to everybody, and then we're going to jump in with a rough plan of what's going to happen. تفضل شيخ.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. ثم ما بعد. Really, Sheikh, it gives me great pleasure, alhamdulillah, to join you on this beautiful conversation on the Protect This House journey. I remember when you introduced this class to Al-Maghrib Institute, I was very excited, to take over in the US on your behalf over here, alhamdulillah, for this exact same topic. And for me, it was a very natural progression to what you usually do. As you can see, we began teaching the fiqh al-usra, subject about families, by introducing the fiqh of love. At least the first class I taught back in 2003 with Sheikh Muhammad Sharif rahimahullah ta'ala. So we began with fiqh of love, in which we were talking about marriage and also separation, both actually in the same class. But then alhamdulillah, a few years later, some of the students came back, said, hey Sheikh, Jazakallah khair, thank you, that was amazing, we had the experience. Now that we got married because of the fiqh of love, we having some issues. How can we stay married right now? Well, what do we need to do? How to make sure the relationship remains, alhamdulillah, intact? So that's when we developed Love Notes class. And Love Notes, Sheikh Yahya Ibrahim as well teaches the class as well elsewhere besides the United States on my behalf as well. So in this, we teach the juicy stuff of marriage, right? So how to stay married, the relationship between a husband and wife, and so on. But then alhamdulillah, a few years later, some of those brothers and sisters who get married, mashallah, enjoy the marital relationship right now, they have kids. So they came to me and they said, okay, now that we have kids, what are we going to do? How can we protect the family? How can we make sure our kids grow up, alhamdulillah, in the right direction, and so on? Hence, the Protect This House class. It was really came like the cherry on top of all those series of fiqh al-usra classes. We teach people about the value of being married, what does it mean, and how to make it right in the relationship. And then, of course, alhamdulillah, after being blessed with kids, the amana and the responsibility of protecting this house is huge. So I want to thank you for introducing the class to begin with. Although I took a different turn than yours in the content, though, but definitely it was a great pleasure to see you, alhamdulillah, and watch some of your videos as you would teach the class. Barakallah fiqh.
Nafa'allahu bik wa jazakumullah khair. I appreciate that, Sheikh, and I couldn't have hoped for someone better to be representing the class in the States, and you know that we've been doing that with Divine Link as well, fiqh salah. So we're connected, mashallah, in the best of ways. So obviously, folks, the subject is a huge one, and obviously it dominates the class itself. So what extra can we do in these sessions? Because to be honest, actually all of the content that we're going to be doing in webinars with our guests is actually covered in the class as well. And so the challenge is, what can we add extra? And I think what the extra is to delve into the insights of the guests. So for example, Sheikh Yasser is not in the sessions of the class. And so that makes him a prime resource to get his opinion on a few things that can add a bit of extra context and also just something of ideas. one of the most important, I noticed that obviously when Al-Maghrib has started to release their videos and clips from the class itself, that they released one particular clip, which was a very, very important lesson for me in the whole concept of the tarbiyah of children. And in actual fact, also the looking after of our parents. Obviously, the class Protect This House is not just about parenting. It's about how to deal with family issues and the politics, and then obviously looking after parents, which we'll cover on Thursday. So it's the whole thing. And what's one of the very interesting things that underpins this entire class is that this is not a divine knowledge. This is a divine guided area, but it's not what we call tawqifi. It is that which is based upon good practice, which good experience and the like. And as we've said, and as Sheikh Yasser would have said, especially in his usul classes as well, this is one of the areas of Islam in which we can say the following statement: what is Islamic and what is correct is what works. And that's a very big thing, because we have grown up with what's the evidence, Quran, Sunnah, etc., etc., etc. And if you didn't think about this like automatically when you thought about when you come across this area or when you're thinking about how to teach your children, the simple way of thinking about it is that here's like us right here teaching you, in webinars, in seminars, on-site, online, and trying to make a science out of it, blah, blah, blah. And you just need to pause and think, my parents, whatever kind of level of job that they did, they never took a single seminar, they never took a single, class, they never took a single whatever. And what, did they all get it wrong? And the previous generations all get it wrong? And all about all other people who live in some other place, whatever, that never had any access to any kind of teachers, did they all get it wrong? And that in itself is a proof to you, an actual practical proof that there are some areas of Islam, and the tarbiyah and ta'aleem of children and like is one of them. Da'wah is another one, okay? These are useful things to know, that in Islam, we do have areas where experts can speak, because we normally close those people down. We say, listen, sit down when it comes to fiqh or aqidah, with our greatest respects to you. This is not the place for an educationalist or for a scientist or for a psychologist or whatever, unless they're actually using the Quran and Sunnah to establish their legal point or their theological point. But when it comes to these areas, we're all about, hey, come in, share good practice, tell us what's worked, especially the non-Muslims that are there, not working within what sometimes restricts us. And that's one of the problems that we find in our Islamic environment, that we get way too much restriction from those people that think everything has to be Islamicized, even when it comes to education of our children. And so I hope that the more light aspect, the non-tawqifi, the non-divinely ordained basis for this subject will allow us in this particular session to be a bit more relaxed and consider a few kind of left field ideas. And so what I propose, Sheikh Yasser, as I spoke to him a couple of days ago, is actually something I really enjoyed with the previous instructors, which is I'm going to think of 3 questions that I really want to know the answer from Sheikh Yasser Berjas as Sheikh Yasser Berjas. I want his opinion and his story and his answer. And so I'll ask him, and then he'll have 3 questions that he thinks of that he wants to ask me concerning the concept of adolescence. And again, I emphasize that we cover obviously birth to kids, to adolescence, to grown up. I mean, in a lot of detail, the fiqh of it and everything connected to it in the class. We are only focusing, to much the latter years, the more difficult years, the teen years, but in a soft way, So, Sheikh Yasser, should I kick things off with my question?
Bismillah.
All right. So my first question to you, and this comes, this question, actually, it's nice to know where this question comes from. And that is that when it comes to yourself and your Islamic practice or your Islamic conversion or the Islamic, whatever, education, call it that.
No.
Was it your grandparents or was it your parents that had the bigger influence? And by that, I don't mean that, just like parents are obviously the day-to-day teachers and the like, but I mean the people that flick the switch, the people that made you realize that there's something to a different level. And it might have occurred youngish or not. And where does this question come from for everybody that's listening? And obviously scholars normally do know where this question comes from, but the masses might not know, and you students might not know. But there was a statement made by Ibn Taymiyyah in which he said that if you look through from an anthropological kind of point of view, that it's quite common to see that the children of scholars do not actually follow their parents in that, and that there normally needs to be a generation gap before that to happen. And even though Ibn Taymiyyah didn't speak a lot of detail about it, but obviously, of course, he's used as an example because his father is not the luminary, but his grandfather, the Al-Majd, is known as the big superstar, not just in the Hanbali school, but in Islam in general. And then, of course, his grandson went above and beyond, but not his son. And there are a few examples like this throughout history, which is quite surprising because you think it'd be the opposite. And so, but it's always something of interest to me when I look at a scholar like Sheikh Yasser, that have you broken the unspoken rule, or are you maintaining the Ibn Taymiyyah rule and it was from your grandparents? What's your take on that, Sheikh?
Well, Sheikh, two things. First of all, in regards to the general principle, why there's always be that generational gap, and why the children of the ulama, like we studied with the mashayikh as well in Medina University and elsewhere and so on. How many of these mashayikh that we studied with, that also follow the path of their parents in terms of religious education, become the next generation of ulama or students of knowledge? Very, very few, really. Like I remember very few teachers who I studied with the son and the father, like Sheikh Al-Abbad, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, for example, right? And that's an example. But Sheikh Al-Uthaymeen, with whom I had the pleasure of staying for a very longer time, I've never really had the chance to study with any of his immediate children, but ironically, with his son-in-law, we studied, of course, Sheikh Khalid Al-Musla, for example, right? But the reason why the ulama, they give some interpretation. One interesting comment I read from one of the classical works on the matter, so the big reason usually is because these children, they grow up in the dalal of their parents' status. What does that mean? Their parents, or the father, for example, if he was the alim and the scholar, he put so much energy and effort growing through the process until he became who he became as a great alim, right? So his privilege is earned by his hard work and effort, and the people recognizes that, so they give him that kind of recognition because of the energy that he puts into that. So the children of the mashayikh, they grow up with their father, for example, or their parents being, mashallah, at a pedestal, right? And as a result, they take that privilege without having to put any effort on their part. For example, when you go to a conference, your kids go to the VIP, for example, lounges, and they meet the Sheikh Abu Isa, and they meet Sheikh Yasir Qadi, and they meet Sheikh Umar Sulaiman, and they just even chill with them and have some fun and so on. That many other youth out there would probably would love to have a moment or a picture, even one of these mashayikh, subhanAllah. So our children don't really understand the difference because they grow up with that privilege. And so they see it already there, and they don't realize that they have to put an effort to maintain that. So they become a huge gap between that privilege and when they reach that age when now they need to become independent of their father's, for example, shadow. And that would create a big fitna between them and the subject of ilm or the status that they wanted to earn. Besides, a lot of people, Allah musta'an, yani, they treat the children of the mashayikh sometimes in an unfair way, right? So they always want to see the children of the mashayikh to be like their parents, and as a result, they treat the kids with a double standard. Any other child is okay, but the son of the sheikh, I mean, that's a big deal, and that is unfortunately is a big turn off to many of these younger ones. And I speak from experience, really, which explains why, unfortunately, and my kids graduated from public school, not from Islamic schools, because of the circumstances they had to go through in these kind of environments. So that's from that perspective. As for me personally, I cannot really attribute that to my family. We come from a Palestinian background, right? So our families were busy surviving. Like my grandfather, he stayed in Palestine, taking care of the land and the properties, obviously, in there. My father had to leave Palestine, and he came to Kuwait to earn for a living, so he could support, his parents in Palestine. And during that time, the 1967 war happened, so my father was trapped outside. And we were born all in diaspora, obviously, as a generation there. So, yeah, my father was surviving. I remember growing up seeing him working 2, 3 jobs, really. And my mom used to also make these Palestinian fancy embroidery thobes. Kind of women, they come and she makes that for them and just to survive. So studying religion and being religious and alim was a luxury, and for that. So that's something we had to go through. That's number one. Number two, also, when it comes to being religious in an Arab environment back in the 1970s and 1980s, it was very dangerous. Like I remember growing up, hearing my mom telling me when I started going to the masjid as a young boy, she goes, "Mama, be careful, take it easy, don't be too religious." Like that's the advice you get from your parents. Why? Because she tells me you're gonna end up one of two things, whether you're gonna end up in prison or dead. And that is a time when the Arab regimes were, of course, and still for many of them, unfortunately, very oppressive regimes. And there is no much religious freedom during those years in 1970s and 60s, 80s as we're growing up. So it was not that healthy, that easy to be religious. Except, alhamdulillah, Allah put barakah, that growing up in Kuwait, alhamdulillah, which was a much better environment than many other Middle Eastern countries when it comes to religiosity, for Allah Ta'ala, that the masajid were open and you were able to study and learn from teachers. So that's my personal experience, really. It's coming from the Palestinian background and culture as well, too. So that's us. I don't know about your experience in the UK.
Well, what was hilarious about the point that you made, sad and very poignant and hilarious as well, in that your mom told you don't be too religious, yani, with as genuine and backed up and real a reason to tell you that. Whereas I bet half of the people on this chat, and me especially, just bunch of packs, we were told yani, about our parents exactly the same thing for the only reason so that we don't get rubbish marks at school. That's it. And because religion was always associated with not studying properly and whatever. And so imagine that my parents told me the same thing and your parents told you the same thing, and mine were completely illegitimate concerns, whereas yours was a genuine, legitimate concern. And I just hope that people realize that when you travel and you meet the Muslims, especially those that were born from outside of the West and haven't lived the kind of safe and privileged and sterile and secular lives that we have, that even our experiences and statements that we have are just so different in depth. I mean, that struck me so much that your mom's told you that for the exact right reason, to protect her family and you and wanting the best for you. Whereas our parents, on the whole, they told us that with not that concern, but purely a secular focus. But anyway, not to throw my parents under the bus, yani, I'm sure Bajari,
No, to be fair as well, just to let you know, like I grew up seeing my grandfather, subhanallah, praying. Whenever he visits from Palestine, he spends few months with us, and we went a couple of times to Palestine. I was young there. I've always seen my grandfather, alhamdulillah, praying. That's something very positive. And ironically, not so many people know that my grandfather was Hanafi. So he was from
so he was guided. He was guided, alhamdulillah.
Akbar, right?
Allah must have happened to his grandson, but it's
so
okay.
My grandfather was Hanafi, and he would teach me the wudu, the Hanafi way and all that stuff and so on, right? Subhanallah, even the way the salah was performed. But ironically and interestingly, my parents, they had different practice, like between Shafi'i and Hanafi as well. So for us growing up in Kuwait as kids, we didn't have that same unified, educational system like you will find in Pakistan madrasa, for example, system. We go to the masajid, very diverse community from all over the world, particularly from all the Arab world, basically. So therefore, the teaching was never really for one particular school. Rather, they just teach you salah in general, right? And if you have any affiliation to your family, they might be giving that extra attention to the details of your ibadah and salah. So we grew up very, very, from that sense, open to all the different and the variations of the ibadah and the salah, what's done and so on. SubhanAllah.
It's interesting you say that, because obviously from us, when we are teaching any anthropological point that's to do with culture and kids and things like that, I always make the point, the difference between the American and the UK or British experience, the two that I have most experience of with respect to student bodies and my interactions with the people asking fatwa and so on. we always look at the UK folks who have been obviously a solid generational presence longer than those in America. And that has led to the development of ghettos and the ghettoization of Muslims. And therefore, obviously, immigrants then obviously flock to those areas. And therefore, what you find is a lot less mixing of cultures and locations and ethnicities. Whereas what you just described in Kuwait is effectively the American model as well. So you find that transfer. And so you see people, obviously, when you come to a standard masjid in the UK, things are a lot more conservative and a lot more kind of strict. Whereas your normal masjid in America that you've obviously observed now that you've traveled is a lot more flexible because you need to be, because you can't have just one dominant madhab in any place. Whereas in the UK, the majority of the masajid will be dominant in one particular madhab. From a youth point of view, in your opinion, does that help a youth's possibility of becoming practicing and developing Islamic whatever? Or do you think a more disciplined, in your experience, would be helpful?
Interestingly, Sheikh, and this is very, very important subject, right? When it comes to ilm, you have to have a discipline in it. You have to have a specific system for it, that someone takes you from A to Z, right? You have to start the elementary and then you go and grow with that ilm. So yeah, sometimes being in a in a well-structured school of thought is good to begin with. But on the other hand, in terms of building a community, and I find it this way, that really that one unified madhab or structure of schooling does not necessarily create a community. But that independence from being in one school of thought, because you have to deal with people of different background, you have to be a leader for everybody. And you have to also be willing to be tolerant and accepting of the others, and realize, that it's not always my way versus the highway and all that kind of stuff and so on. So that kind of environment that creates that liberal thinking of outside of the rigidity of one, for example, system, it helps creates a community with, of course, with the creativity and become very genuine and mashallah cooperation mentality and so on, versus everybody just kind of like on autopilot moving in one direction. So that's something I noticed, and I saw that the youth will flourish more when there is more opening for other ideas than when you have it only one way.
And I think what you just said there, I'm glad you said that, because obviously this is kind of focusing on a little bit more focused on adolescents and teenagers. Certainly in my own family's practice with my own children, that was a key part, I think, of some of the what's the word I'm looking for? Because you described it so well, right? The privilege that our kids have of being with these folks means that it's nothing special. And so for them, knowledge is like normal, and books, like you're just surrounded by books there. I'm surrounding everywhere by books, and the kids don't pick them up because that's the furniture.
They don't even remember that. They don't even can imagine the struggle we had to collect that library, right?
So that actually, so here's the point. I mean, now kids, I'm talking about back then. Now they've got the double problem of they don't value the books, and then they don't value books in the first place because they got it all on a whatever. At least, yeah, exactly. So previous times they wouldn't have an alternative like online and phones and stuff. So they only had books or no books, and they still would not value their.
Remember the book fairs we had the Jama Islamiyya in Medina. Subhanallah, I remember every year in the winter break they have a book fair. And we as students, of course, we're always broke. We don't have much money really. So, but you save as much as you can from the pennies that you get from the university until that time. And then you go to go and buy. SubhanAllah, I've never had a really big budget for buying books. So you have to be conservative and you have to be very selective on knowing your priorities, which book you're going to buy. So, because once you put your money in it, khalas, it's over. You're not going to have another chance. But you see some, mashallah, privileged students who come from certain Muslim countries, tabarakallah, very well privileged, and they drag behind them 2-3 people carrying loads of books with them to the car. And it's like, subhanallah, how can they afford all of that stuff? So going through these books made it much more valuable for us, subhanallah. These books that I have, they have history right now. Unfortunately, my kids don't understand that. They don't see the value of it, unfortunately. And alhamdulillah, just to give you good news, for the light tabaraka wa ta'ala, now, in my masjid, in our program that we have, we call Ta'sil, which is basically kind of like starting from the foundation. Part of what we teach is we go with the classical traditional way of doing it. And that's reading the book from actual physical book. Alhamdulillah, we finished from cover to cover. For the past year and a half right now, we've been reading from the book of Ibn Qudama rahimahullah, Mukhtasar Minhaj al-Qasidin on Tarbiyah and Akhlaq. And the second book is Al-Arba'in al-Nawawiyya, Ibn Rajab rahimahullah's explanation of the 40 hadith Imam al-Nawawi. Right now, we're at hadith number 37. So we passed actually half of the book, alhamdulillah, almost 2/3 right now. And we read the actual content of the book, and it's mashallah, it's very exciting for people to feel connected with the ilm in that fashion. So we did something extra by doing what we call a ta'sil intensive. And that's by doing one day, 6-7 hours, reading full book from cover to cover. We did it twice already, alhamdulillah. And after that, we have some assignment for it. And I just want to say that in the midst of all this digital world, there's a glimpse of hope that people still, alhamdulillah, have some, I would say, any affinity to actual hard books. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen.
No, that's a fantastic. Everybody knows about that seal actually, and we have a UK version that Sheikh Ahsan Hanif runs. It's called Isnad. And anybody that's interested in doing this, then just Google Isnad and Sheikh Ahsan. And obviously in the States, do you do yours online as well, Sheikh? Is it got an online?
It's on Wednesday. It's usually on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Central Time, US time. Those are the weekly classes and open for the public, alhamdulillah. So it's on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Central Time, US time.
Jazakallah khair, because it's so important to stay grounded with actual books. I know folks that think that, you know, why, but there is something special. But the point I was making about being different, what I want to maybe, you know, some of you might be thinking, what's the relevance to us? What lessons can we take from this? Because there is actually a lesson, and that is that sameness and monochrome and that kind of boring, monotonous reality to life will always turn kids off. And you know, whatever you can do to mix it up, to make things different to whatever it is that you like and you do and you whatever, will actually bring interest to kids. That's why your kids, you could be the biggest scholar in the world and nobody cares about you at home. And they always, we want to listen to Yasir Qadi, we want to listen to Muslim. And I've had, you know, they drive me bloody crazy. I said, if anyone mentions Yasir Qadi's name in my house, I'm going to slap him, all right? Drive me nuts. We want Umar Sulaiman's opinion. Umar Sulaiman's opinion. Umar Sulaiman wants my opinion. What do you want Umar Sulaiman's opinion? And because they want something different. Now, that's actually nice because they're saying it in Islamic style. But in any part, if you want to get a better connection with your teenagers, that is one of the best ways. And I remember my second son, Yahya, I never forget this. Standard, not really, you know, doing everything, of course, you know, praying and everything, because obviously, you know, he'd have no other option not to in a house like mine. But I remember when we was in Egypt once and I was sitting there and praying, I'd finished my Sunnah and I was leaning against the wall and I turned to look at him praying. And I don't know why I had not noticed this before, but I'm watching him pray and he's in tashahhud. And I want to say he's maybe 10, maybe, or maybe 2 or 3 years plus minus. I can't remember exactly how old he was. But I remember this very clearly, that he's in tashahhud and then he goes, like all of the Masris, all of the Egyptians around him, like this. I was looking at him and I said to him, I called him up. I said, son, what the hell's all this business? What's all this? He goes, that's the way it's done. That's the Sunnah. He goes, that's the first time that I heard this phrase in my life come from this boy's mouth. That's the Sunnah. I go, that's the Sunnah. I go, did you just say that's the Sunnah? He goes, that's how all of these people do it. That's how they've been teaching me. And it's something that I want to carry on doing. I said, did you ever see me? I teach the fiqh of Salah. Did you ever see me? I took you to the fiqh of Salah twice. I taught in Birmingham, I brought him along. I took him to one that we taught in Manchester. I took him along. I said, did you ever see this as an opinion? Or that this is a followed position? Or that this, etc. He goes, no, but I'm here to study the Sunnah with these people. That's what I'm thinking. And I stepped back, I thought to myself, you know what? I like this kid. I think this kid's got something about him. And I remember that moment because the lesson is that sometimes for all of you, if you're having a little kind of plateau with your children or you're struggling to get through, mix it up, get other people involved. And in the class, I remember we speak about this, that when we go through the schooling system in Protect This House and we analyze four models: the public school, the private school, the Islamic school, and then homeschooling. The session on homeschooling that we discuss it is emphasizing how important it is that you're not doing the homeschooling, that they need a change. So the teachers have got to be external. The places that you teach in have got to be separate. You've got to create a difference from parent and the teacher, and then the teacher and then another teacher, and the environment when they're playing and relaxing and chilling in, and then a study area. That change, that artificial induced change, needs to be done. Anyway, we spent so long on the first one, Sheikh. What's your question? We might have to cut these to two, but anyway.
Well, for me, Sheikh, my question to you is in regards to obviously us being teenagers. I mean, many people now talk about teenagers as like a doom and gloom scenario, right? Like these are the people who are going into a dark tunnel. God knows how it's going to look like for the future and so on. But what about you? What about us in our generation? Did we go through our own version of doom and gloom scenario for the teenagers, or your teenagers age life was, mashallah, rosy and beautiful and gorgeous and everything, tabarak ar-Rahman, yani righteous for you?
Well, see, it was all going great until you added the word righteous at the end. Why do you have to ruin the whole conversation?
Because some people they might think that, look, our teenage years were way better than the teenage years of this time. So therefore, you guys, what are you talking about? You don't have any pressure. You never had any problem and so on. Not realizing each area, at least each, I would say, era, has its own dark tunnel that they had to go through. Like I said myself, for example, for me, I'm growing up, my mom is not supporting. She's saying, look, listen, man, you're going to die or be in prison because of being religious. Can you imagine this kind of, growing up with that mentality, association of faith, religion, being dead or being in prison, which is, to be honest with you, true during that time.
100%.
It was true.
100%.
You become religious, you go to the masjid a few times, that's it. Your name is already actually with the Secret Service and you're done. So that's our version maybe of some part of the struggle we had to go through. So what about you? Do you think that your life was...
That's why when you said it, I immediately had to stop you and say, it's crazy that you say it and it's actually true, because I've heard that statement all my life and it was not based upon any real, genuine, actual factual reality. And it just wasn't. It was just a secular approach. And so for me, like I said, what I was about to say, I had a fantastic childhood because I'm the eldest in my family. I do whatever I want. I had parents that were illiterate. They were not educated. They were labor class. My mother was a housewife. She had nothing, whatever, very basic, didn't understand, didn't speak the language. And my father was a laborer. He was a forklift driver. Again, very simple, basic guy. Used to work 2 weeks in a day shift, 2 weeks in a night shift. I used to do whatever I wanted. I was the king of everything that I surveyed. And so that's why when you said, did I have a great time and did I have a happy time and was it dark? There was no darkness. There was no nothing. All right. But was it righteous? It wasn't righteous. Okay. Let's see. Let me make that right clear. It wasn't righteous. I memorized a lot of the Quran because my father sent me to madrasa and I used to enjoy that, but purely in a secular sense, in a complete secular sense. And I think that's why I think to myself that even though my parents were really good people, my father especially, and it was a very principled man, and still is, hafidhahullah, still is, but the Islamic the Islam of meaningfulness was not there, and it was almost entirely secular. And the reason why I asked you the first question is because my parents didn't have that Islamic influence upon me, even though they made sure they tried their very best for me going misguided. And the reason why Protect This House was so important for me was to make sure that my teenage years do not recreate themselves in other children and my own children. Likewise, in terms of the risks now, obviously the risks now are so much worse than what it used to be. If we fell into a problem, the problem was entirely menial or insignificant in comparison to what's happening now. And I know everybody is watching this, and if your kids are here, cover their ears, kick them out of the room. This is the moment, as we do in Protect This House, because I will often say, right, kids, out. Because sometimes we have to speak about something. But frankly, I'm going to give you 3 seconds. 2, 1, 0. Stealing from a shop, going out with a girl, blah, blah, blah. These are actually menial compared to the fitan that our children are falling into today, which is crazy that we speak about zina and sadaqah, or big issues in our deen. Those kind of sins, you would almost be hoping, a'udhu billah, you'd be hoping that that's the news that you get, or that's what you find on the phone of your child, or that's what you realize after doing some investigation into your teenagers, that that was their crime, and not them developing this desire to question Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or have this idea that they know something better than you with respect to theology, or their identity. They believe that whatever, or that I'm being restricted, I should do what I want. I can tell you that I was and this is going to come to my question, I was the most rebellious kid when it comes to sin, right? But not for a second did I ever question Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or authority, or gender, or the big things, or loyalty, or hypocrisy, or whatever. All low-level bakwas, all low-level stuff, lying and thinking, which is obviously crazy to say this in public as teachers in a class, but it's facts. Would you agree, Sheikh?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not, Sheikh, subhanAllah, I mean, you talk about your environment in the UK. Imagine our situation in a much more conservative area, like in Kuwait, for example. Like the biggest sin back then, probably from the thing that the young one will do, is the boys will be lining up, outside of the apartment building, waiting for the girls' school bus to pass by. And when they drop off the girls or pick up, the girls, they start throwing all these, home phone numbers, not even actually smartphones back then, the home phone number, and whenever the phone rings, you have to be the first to pick it up, because if your mom picks up the phone and there's a girl on the other side, you're in big trouble. Like, these adventures were some of the biggest thing any probably kid of that time could do. I know some people might say the fitan were less, back then, but honestly, in terms of the magnitude of that time, they still were dangerous for these kids. They were more conservative, kind of like environments, but the thought of it was also very dangerous. But alhamdulillah, I think for me, I grew up, primarily in the 1980s in Kuwait, and these are the years that they call the year of as-sahwa, right? And that's the awakening. So people start coming back to the deen after the 1960s and 70s and all these crazy years of, secularism and radical liberalism and all the stuff and progression and so on. And they came to some sort of like becoming more conservative. So alhamdulillah, we grew up in the 1980s, and that's when people start highlighting the value of deen and religion. So even though you would be a bad kid, right? But if you find someone, one of the adults, for example, stare at you, you know your place. There's still that level of akhlaq to that level, I would say. Not everybody, obviously, but generally speaking, there was that level of it. But alhamdulillah, for us, it's not my parents or family that led me to the masjid, really. It was peers, a bunch of kids. It was Ramadan, and we're off in the summer, there's no school. And obviously living in Kuwait when it's hot, having a cooled environment is a climate environment is luxury. So the masajid were open for the public, alhamdulillah, and the AC there was amazing. So as kids, we said, hey man, let's go to the masjid. So we go to the masjid, and then we noticed there was a bunch of kids in a room on the side with a glass door, and they're just acting like crazy over there, having fun and playing. SubhanAllah, we start staring through the glass door, and then another kid from inside saw us looking at it. He came out and he opened the door. He goes, do you guys want to come in? And we look at each other. It was a weird really any concept, because we've never done that before. I was maybe 10 or 11 years old at the time. And subhanAllah, we got into that room, we never left it. We never left that environment, subhanAllah. So it's just one simple call from a kid, you guys want to come into the room? And we just loved what we saw there, alhamdulillah.
And that, I think, is the lesson, right? I mean, from a parenting point of view, I think that the reason that we discuss this or try to open up this kind of issue and be aware of it is to realize that the solution for this back then ironically, is the same solution right now. Because there'll be a lot of people that be thinking, so, okay, well, what do you do about it? Well, I'll tell you what you do about it. The same thing that you just heard Sheikh Yasser Bajasiani just tell you that happened to him as a young'un that stopped him from going off the rails is the same thing that you will see today as well. Good company will always be the solution. The Prophet ﷺ said that a person is upon the deen of their friend, and you have to ensure even more so now, just like it happened by the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's happened to me the same way as well when I started practicing, that the mind just fell out of the sky, mashallah, tabarakallah. But the way to actually ensure that your children do not go into that direction is to, instead of focusing upon them, focus on who they are going to naturally progress to or digress to or move to based upon the geographical reality, based upon how they're entering that school and what they're going to feel like. So when I think about this, and I studied this issue forensically, and what I mean by that is that when I knew that the challenge was going to start, which is to move from the basic school to the next school, I looked at first of all, and analyzed each child's maturity, each child's social character and confidence. And so if one of your kids, for example, is a lot more a dominant character, then you know they're going to be a leader in a group versus those that are more a follower and are just willing to be with others and follow their line. So once I identified that, then I realized that, okay, he's going to be looking for people to actually join. Then I realized who are they going to be then likely to do that is the effort, when you go into, because schools are different. If you have those schools like in America where in the same setup, they move and they carry on moving, right, to middle school and then to high school. Whereas in the UK, where we have a junior, an infants and junior system, and then most of the time, you get then taken to a completely different campus, different school from which lots of children then come into. And so the class gets mixed up with lots of first time meetings with other people. And so naturally, you're going to move to the people that you knew that also moved with you into this new school from your old school. And so I targeted those folks. Then I found those that are going to be walking the same way. And I did this in advance. And then I went and I found and identified their parents. And I said to their parents that, would you agree to meet with me to discuss before school starts about how it's going to actually work in the first few weeks if we can actually create some kind of almost gang mentality, a siege mentality between this particular group of Muslims that, although right now don't have so much in common and they're not very practicing or whatever, but at least if they themselves can stick together in a far more threatening environment to their identity, to sin, to XYZ, then that will be the best form of trying to, in a very difficult situation, protect them from the fitna. And so I hope that people realize that. Sheikh Yasser, this principle will never change.
True. I mean, the suhbah is very important. There is no doubt about it. يعني النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قالها في الأحاديث يعني they mentioned that you are depends on the people around you. However, there are certain risks today that we also need to take into consideration, even as we try to associate our children with Muslim company and so on. Sheikh, in the past, يعني the culture dominated the tarbiyah. And back in the days, almost you could say the entire society was on the same page. So the community will raise their kids in a certain way, in a certain principles, and everybody, even if I don't know who you are, I still trust that if my kids go with your child, we're gonna be fine. Because overall, the whole community have that. Like I grew up in Kuwait, obviously in Ramadan, yani, subhanallah. As kids, we sometimes disappear for days before we get back home, literally, and parents would not even worry about it. Why? Because they know as long as they're in the neighborhood, it doesn't matter which house they are, alhamdulillah, they should be fine. So we used to sometimes in Ramadan, we used to spend the entire night after Tarawih in someone's house until Fajr. The host family will give us suhoor, and then after Fajr we come back and we crash in that house. We talk about 20 kids in one single room. We just crash there until close to Dhuhr time, and then we start going back home. Parents would even worry about that. Today, a bit different, Sheikhna. I think one of the major differences is technology. Because even if your children are day and night in your house, if they have access to the internet, they're not living with you anymore. They reside with you, but they don't live anymore with you. They live somewhere else. So then they learn their values from too many coaches, too many teachers. And they're not the same values that you and I grew up with, for example, in the same neighborhood, when there was no access to learning and teaching unless you come to the masjid and to learn from the teacher until you learn from the exact same source. But our kids' sources right now are many. That's one. The second thing they say, you are the average of 6 to 7 people around you. So if you want to see who you are in terms of your akhlaq, your values, your aspiration, your dreams, your this and that, you are the average of the 6, 7 people you surround yourself with. And nowadays, with this kind of like a new environment with our kids on TikTok and Instagram and all the kind of stuff and so on, it changed. Back then, the average 6, 7 kids that were with you were all the same thing, the same dream, the same goals, the same, we used to watch the same game together, for example. The TV was only one channel. That's it. You missed it, you missed it. But so now the variety makes it much more challenging to raise a group of youth to be equally, alhamdulillah, well educated in their faith than it was before. It's much more challenging right now.
Yeah, and obviously, I know folks are going to be thinking, right, so how do we control the internet exposure? And that in itself is a separate lecture, let alone, thinking, obviously, we don't have that much time left. And the class, obviously, we speak about that and smartphone strategy and what different parents in different cultures can get away with versus what they can't, and to be realistic as well. So, and it does need to be a nuanced approach. And I'll just, reassure those students that are thinking, are you going to tackle this in the class? We go into a lot of detail, sharing obviously personal anecdotes as well. So the last thing that I want to ask you, Sheikh, because I do think that one of the other issues when it comes to teenagers is us obviously giving them a hard time, or they insisting that that's what we do, that we give them a hard time. And there got to be some kind of endpoint to the hard time, which I'm guessing they believe, and I suppose we should believe, when they become an adult.
Yes,
when they don't, whatever. So I want to ask you, obviously, an adult, what does that even mean? I mean, if you go Islamic legal, then they're an adult as soon as they go through puberty, right? But in the real world, that's nowhere near an adult. And so 100%. And so therefore, the phrase itself is something which is very subjective and dependent upon whatever. I want to ask you, when do you think you became an adult? And then what can you learn from that when it comes to how you deal with your kids, which obviously they're grown up now, mashallah. Some of them obviously teenagers, but the others are now beyond that. So how can you then apply it? And how can you advise other folks to apply what you personally went through?
Sheikh, I mean, our personal experience is very unique. And I have to bring it back again to the struggle of the Palestinian people. I'm a Palestinian, grew up in a Palestinian environment, Palestinian neighborhood, Palestinian household, Palestinian dreams of going back again home since we were kids. So honestly, I don't know, maybe some other communities and cultures went through also similar struggle. But speaking from my personal experience, I believe that really Palestinian kids who live in the diaspora outside of the Western world, they don't live childhood, Sheikh. We skip childhood. We're born men. Really, we're born adults already, because you don't have time to be a child. You're gonna have to be tough. You're gonna have to be this. You have to be that. So my mom, for example, I remember her teaching me when I was growing up in school. Said, "Look, Mama, listen to me. You're a Palestinian. You have to understand, to survive in this world, it's one of two things: whether you have money or you have a degree. That's it. You need to be rich so you can survive, or you need to have a degree so you can study, so you can be somewhere, something, subhanAllah." And that's why you see the Palestinian community, it's one of the most educated really communities around the world, really, at that level, subhanAllah, in terms of the ratio of the population. For I do believe from a very young age, we were taught differently, really. And from a very young age, I used to go and work. We used to even, during the summer as children, we go, and my mom and my dad would send me, for example, to go to the corner store to be a helper over there. As kids, we walk around in the neighborhood collecting cans and glass bottles and stuff like that, and we go exchanging for pennies and then get something. So we grew up in a different environment. Our kids, tabarak ar-Rahman, alhamdulillah, they live the privilege. Live that privilege. So I can't really equate that to in that way. Just to give an example to how privileged our youth today versus what we had to go through, subhanAllah. And not to diminish, of course, their challenge that they go through. May Allah make it easy for them. But I remember that I used to save my allowance that I get from for the school for the week, and I keep saving it all the way until the end of the week. So when the last day of the school day, it was Wednesday for us. So Thursday and Friday was off for us. So on Wednesday, I come back. Look, I starve myself during the week. I don't buy a sandwich, during the week. I take sandwich from home because I want to save these pennies until the end of the week to go to the corner store and buy a chocolate bar, Mars or Snickers. It was like a luxury thing back then. And you go and you buy it, and I go and I open the top, I take a bite, and I cover it, and I put it back into my white shirt, facing outward, so kids can read the Mars or Snickers in the pocket. And when I come out, flashing it out, obviously for everybody to see it and brag about it. And everybody says, "Hey, can I have a bite? Can I have a bite?" I'm just like, nope, nope, nope. Subhanallah. Right now at home, the amount of chocolate that is on the counter, in the cupboard, in drawers, and no one's paying attention to it, subhanallah. So yeah, growing up as a child, alhamdulillah, though, don't take me wrong, we had a wonderful childhood. Yeah, it was rough childhood for us. Our neighborhood was, mashallah, our apartment building, we had about 6 apartments. We total about 50 kids from 6 apartments only. You can imagine the whole neighborhood. So we spend most of our time in the streets playing and being creative, creating games and so on, until the end of the day, and then we go back home. Alhamdulillah, by the age 10, 11 years old, I would say, that's when I started going to the masjid, which was about 20 minutes walk. That's how far the masjid was. Before, alhamdulillah, we got a closer masjid next door, yani. So we go, and it was dangerous, subhanAllah, because there was a street that you had to cross. And it was very dangerous road, yani. But I remember once we went to the masjid, it became our home, khalas. We start having different groups, different, of course, system and different way of living our life. That's our childhood. I don't know about you. I mean, you grew up in the UK, must be privileged as well too, right?
Wallahi, and unfortunately, far too much privilege. And although I'm not gonna lie, everyone has taken that bite of the chocolate bar and then put the wrapper back on. The skill is in, of course, opening it in a way where you don't destroy the whole thing, so that there's at least enough to be able to cover it.
And then you count, your chocolate pieces, and make sure that no one actually took, in absence, right?
I used to eat the Twix. I used to look at the Twix, and I used to look at it. I used to nibble the chocolate from the sides and around, and then I would then do the caramel at the top, and then I would leave the biscuit because I know that the biscuit itself is the strongest part. It's going to one that survive the most. Sheikh, the strategies that we used to think, the creativity was crazy.
I'm listening to you. I'm saying like it's an art of eating a chocolate bar, man. These kids, they would never grow up to really to enjoy that moment and that feeling. No, there was an art of eating a chocolate bar even.
So therefore, on that point, therefore to make it beneficial to everybody, because you gave two points. You mentioned one very briefly, and you mentioned the one in detail, which is the fact that actually the reality of your life was that it was going to be easy for you, or naturally, because you were privileged in your lack of privilege. That's what I would say.
No.
You know that your kids do not have that same Palestinian privilege. Of course, they are born Palestinian and they're proud of it, but not in the same way that you did. They didn't have to fight for it or feel the pain of it as much, I should say, that you did. Therefore, what can you share that is relevant for the normal people and their children to be able to take this kind of this point, where they will be able to reach adulthood and you will recognize that this is their version of suddenly becoming an adult, so that you can now lay off and take it a bit more easy with them?
One of the biggest mistakes parents they do with their children, especially those who came from underprivileged communities, and societies and so on, is thinking that I don't want my kids to go through the struggle I had to go through. So they create a convenient lifestyle for their children. And that's one of the biggest mistakes they do for them. Because by design, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put us on earth to really to struggle, right? فَتَشْقَى, He said subhanahu wa ta'ala. So ash-shaqa, or getting out of that kind of struggle, is part of the process. But when you as a parent come and give your children an easy exit out of that struggle part, to give them the outcome of it, they would never really survive for too long. Like basically, it took you 20 plus years to get where you are today, and you give it to them in a few days. Like one time I remember, just to give an example, one day, mashallah, a young man came pick me up from the airport, and he wasn't even 20 years old. And mashallah, he was driving one of those fancy Mercedes cars that I would dream, yani, to just be in it, not even to own it. So mashallah, he picked me up, and may Allah bless him, Rabbil Alameen. So I was kind of surprised. I said, mashallah, whose car is this? He goes, it's mine. I said, where'd you get it from? He says, my dad bought it from me. And for me, I felt so, from the inside, upset, to be honest with you, that you killed your child motivation already. Like literally, he was supposed to go on the field that you gone through to become a doctor, for example, to afford buying this car to yourself, let alone to your child. And now you're giving your children shortcuts to privilege that they will never really have that. So therefore, should we have it tough on our kids? Oh, you guys are rough on us and this and that and so on. It's not about being rough. I'm not your friend. I'm your parent. And it's my job to get you through life with the skills and the mindset and the thick skin that you really need to deal with all future struggles and so on. If I'm gonna allow you to be easy and have an easy life for yourself, that's I'm not doing you any favor, really. And you know the very famous statement that says, what do you call? Real men, they create convenient time, or hard times create real men, and real men creates convenient time, and convenient time creates weak men, and weak men create hard times. So that's the generational gap that you talk about, right? That there will have to be a generation that is weak, unfortunately, to create difficult time that will produce the tough people who will make things better in the future. So I would say my advice for the parents is, look, it's not your job to make your kids happy. Your job is to make them responsible. Being happy is their business. But your job is to truly give them what they need, not what they want. Because we have seen that from many parents and kids as well, in fact, young people, when they reach their 20s and 30s, they would say, oh my God, I really appreciate my parents, alhamdulillah, for what they've done. If I've listened to them, it would be something different. Just to mention something real quick, subhanAllah, it's a person, I think my son wanted to buy a car, which I'm supposed to help him with it, obviously. And he insists on a particular car. And I just like, Baba, listen to me. Just listen to me, man. It's not worth it. This car is going to cause you trouble. He just didn't listen. And now, 2 years later, I was talking to my daughter. He goes to her. He goes, listen to him. I didn't listen to him 2 years ago. He blamed me. He goes, come on, man. You're two times my age. You should have stopped me back then. I'm just like, really? Now you want me to stop you 2 years ago? So yeah, but alhamdulillah, I'm glad that at least they look back and they realize you were wise enough to do what you did for me.
It's interesting that you said about kids looking back or actually anybody looking back when they grow old. Isn't it interesting that you can think of so many examples of amongst us, amongst people that we know, amongst our own children, that look back and they thank Allah, like I do for my parents, that we went through difficulty. I wonder how many kids do that going through privilege.
Yeah.
Because when we think in our heads, what happens with parents? They get weak. and they like, yeah, but you know, I can't put my kid through that. He's gonna have to go out and work, and he's gonna have to go and do this, and let me buy it. It's okay. Blah blah. You know, that weakness, and he's my love of my heart. You know, blah 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 blah
And
blah
let
blah.
them finish school. Don't bother them.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah,
find a part-time
exactly.
job or something.
Whatever it is, we justify it because of our love and our care and concern, and therefore we pay for the things and we spoil them, and then you know whatever, and give them luxury stuff. Blah 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 blah. I think it would be very interesting to see the stats of when they become 30 years old. Do they go back and say, I'm so happy that my parents bought me my car and got me this and got me that? I wonder how many of those lot do it compared to those that thank Allah for their parents not doing the same thing. And I swear that there will be a massive disparity between the amount that actually do that.
You know what my concern would be, to be honest with you, is that these people you're talking about, they probably most likely will be ungrateful to their parents than others because they grow up with entitlement.
100%. 100%.
They will grow up with
100%.
entitlement, and they would expect from their parents to always serve them, you know, with their financial privilege and so on, as long as they have the money for it, unfortunately. And we've seen that. I've seen some young men, unfortunately, they fail to launch into adulthood because they grew up all their life into that privileged life, so they don't really have any motivation to do anything. Like, why do I have to do that? Like, I literally had to discuss one. I had a gathering. I'm not a gathering, actually. I talked with a guy who literally, he told me in my face, he goes, why do I have to do that? Like, I don't even have to go and work and do this because his family, mashallah, they're wealthy enough to take care of everything for him. And I'm like, I don't know what to say. I mean, if there's no motivation for him to do anything because he has everything, alhamdulillah, easy, that's hard and difficult. How can you convince him?
Wallahi, Sheikh, I want to say, because obviously we've now gone over time, I can see Hafsa itching and moving, and you know she drops all these signals and stuff. I want to say, and I wrote about this and I've said it, that this class was obviously a very, very raw and a very sensitive class, and it's one of the ones that I enjoyed most because you wouldn't believe the amount of people challenged me in it, and obviously it has a lot of panel sessions and people, and I am trying to provoke people as well, and I repeat many times in the parenting aspect that don't be weak. Don't be weak. And people don't like to be told that they're being weak with their kids. Actually, people don't like to be told anything with their kids. And obviously, me, I'm not interested about your feelings. I'm here to teach you about the dangers, and I'm here to teach you about some principles that I think are going to help you. And so if I think you're being weak, I'm going to say it. And if I think that your expression of love, whatever, I didn't say that Allah's not going to reward you for your intentions or that you don't deserve to be thinking like that. But you're being weak by letting yourself in, and you've got to be cool, to be kind sometimes, and we're not telling you to be a monster, but sometimes this is the right thing to do. What I do like is that people push back, and I'm okay with people pushing back, but I hope that you also learn and realize that when a time comes that you realize that you made a mistake, please don't do it with the rest of the kids as well. Please don't think it's over. This is another lesson. Again, this is all coming from the class, kind of sharing the material here. But another massive mistake you will make is that I messed it up with my kids. Is done and dusted now. It's never done and dusted. You can teach other parents and their kids. You can give advice to other kids that you see that are not related to you. And then your grandkids and whatever, you are always going to be held accountable. You might not have done it successfully with your children, but you might have a great impact upon other children from the mistakes that you made with your own parenting, with your own children. So I really hope everybody understands that. That is so, so important. You might have messed it up once. You might not have liked being told. And you don't need to come back and say to me, man, you were right. Don't tell me ever. Keep telling me I'm wrong. But at least then fix that mistake with somebody else's children when it comes to their parenting. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Sheikh Yasser, I honestly... Yes.
Thing I want to add, if you don't mind,
Sheikh.
Just because I don't want people to leave the session thinking that what we discussed right now would work with every family and every young person. We give general, of course, you know, principles and ideas, but at the end of the day, every family has its own unique circumstances, your own reasons for what you do for, and of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put us in different places and for different reasons. So as we give all these advices, make sure before you make any radical decision in the way you treat your kids and your kids and so on, ask about your particular situation. You might have a different answer. You might be given a different, actually, direction in regards to your particular situation. And subhanAllah, sometimes even you can have multiple answers for the multiple kids, right? So your older child, for example, versus the younger one versus the middle child, it's different. So each one of them is very unique in their own way. Wallah, I just wanted to make sure that disclaimer here, people understand this advice might not be particular to everybody. So alhamdulillah, at least they realize they can inshallah tailor it to their own circumstances.
And those folks who are listening to this statement right at the end, this is the perfect summary or the meaningful summary of the statement we made at the beginning, which is one of the very interesting parts of Islamic parenting is not that I know the Islamic answer to it, because there is no Islamic answer to it. Because whatever works is whatever works. And therefore, that means that there will be families that will do something entirely different and it will work for them. And just like, for example, for you, Sheikh Yasser, your reality is something that we cannot recreate in our own children. We can't. We could try our absolute very, very best. It's just not a sustainable model to be able to try to even create in an artificial way. So we have to then find one that fits in a modern Dallas environment in America, in an era of Trump and an era of smartphones. And it's going to be slightly different to an era of Obama that has a greater sense of left and liberal kind of dominance in politics, which is separate and different to another era. And this will always keep changing. And that's, of course, one of the most important lessons of tarbiyah when it comes to parenting, and especially from an Islamic angle. Sheikh, I just wanted to say, Jazakumullah khair. Obviously, it was just, I mean, I've been lucky enough now, alhamdulillah, to spend with you now in the last 6 months at Summit. It was fantastic. At Umrah, it was fantastic. And now in Protect This House, it's even better. And inshallah, in a couple of months, inshallah, we'll see you in Al-Haram bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Barakallahu fikum, Sheikh. Wa nafa Allahu bik. Jazakumullah khair. Hafsa, you take it away.
Jazakumullah khair, Sheikh Abu Isa and Sheikh Yasser. I know this felt like a podcast, alhamdulillah. It felt like we were just peeking into a conversation that you guys were both having. And it was a pleasure, alhamdulillah, to kind of learn a little bit about your childhood experiences. And especially now, as we're seeing the Palestinian struggle play out on our screens as adults, now knowing the background that you had, I won't age you, but however many years ago, as you were growing up as well. So Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Yasser, for sharing that and for being vulnerable with us. Inshallah, I know there was a lot of hard-hitting topics that we get a chance to cover in the class about some of the more difficult stages of adolescence and how you navigate that. And as Sheikh Abu Isa mentioned, there's a lot of debate that happens back and forth in the live Q&A sessions about what's relevant in our context today. Things like that have come up in recent years, like vaping and weed and like all the other challenges that parents are just learning about, and then learning that their kids are being exposed to and, falling, victim to as well. So we're going to do a lot more of that nitty gritty talk in the class as well. But I hope that inshallah, you guys benefited from this discussion so far. Any final words, inshallah, before we close off? I want to give a quick little poke into the portal for the students as well.
I do, because I just want to know that how comes Houston is going to see Sheikh Yasser just this weekend? Tell us, Sheikh Yasser.
Bismillah. I mean, inshallah, I hope in Allah Azza wa Jalla. It's a different right now realm as we prepare for the month of Ramadan, inshallah, tabaraka wa ta'ala. We're going to be visiting the community over there, inshallah. I'm going to actually be going to different communities. I'm going to Oklahoma, Houston, and then inshallah Tennessee in Allah Azza wa Jalla. Looking forward to meet many of these students there, inshallah.
And they took all the benefit, man, mashallah. Barakallahu fikum. Yeah, I guess I just want to say that obviously these classes are this series, I should say, is about promoting the class. And I have no shame in promoting this class. I actually believe that I believe that there should be nobody that should not study this subject. The Sheikh Yasser explained in the beginning that there are classes that come in a series, and this one is one which focuses on so many important subjects, which is making sure that we get through the most tough times of the marriage, then the children itself and everything to do with that. And obviously the live Q&As and allow you to then personalize it and specify it. So that's very beneficial, regardless of whether you're from the past students who have already got the class or you haven't got the class, then of course you should join. And then the subject that we're going to cover on Thursday, which is, unfortunately, I want to say, a very emotional one, a very difficult one for myself at the moment, but even more so for Sheikh Yasser, who's having this struggle with his own parents, and he's going to be very open about it. So I think that we really were happy, actually, when we thought about what we would speak about. And maybe you guys can learn some lessons from the difficulties that we're going through with our own parents right now, looking after them as they're reaching essentially their final stages. And there's a lot of fiqh to discuss, and there's a lot of other aspects. So anyway, that's going to be on Thursday, inshallah. And the rest of the class is the rest of the class. Barakallahu fikum. And Jazakumullah khair, Hafsa, we can pass it over to you.
Barakallah, Sheikh. Jazakumullah khair to Sheikh Abu Isa and Sheikh Yasser Burjas for this insightful talk. For those who've been coming in later and desperate to catch up to the parts they missed, this session is recorded, inshallah. You'll be able to see it on YouTube, and you may be sent a link as well, inshallah. And of course, the class that has inspired this series, Protect This House, which is talking about all the difficult stages in your relationships, in your family life, as the Sheikh has outlined, of finding a partner, building a partner that you want to have a family with, having young kids, going through adolescence, going through, relationship problems, divorce, growing old together and dealing with parents and all the other, the natural, difficult issues that you have in your personal lives, inshallah, is going to be covered in this class in a lot more detail. As those have been asking, we have 6 modules, alhamdulillah, for the seminar. And let me see if I can give you a quick little poke through about what we cover. But we have topics around our parents, women's role in the family itself, husband and wife, a lot on children, a lot of Q&As on adolescence as well, and childhood development, education, challenges in parenting, etc. We have 4 live sessions that are upcoming, inshallah, where you guys get a chance to ask the Sheikh a lot more nitty-gritty questions about the challenges that you're having in these areas of your life, and of course, resources, a class binder, and more. So check out the link that has been shared, inshallah, in the description there, and make sure that you join this journey with us. We will also have 3 more sessions as part of this series. Our next session, inshallah, is taking place this Thursday, same time, same place, with Sheikh Yasser Qadi. So we're very excited to delve into that with him, and make sure that you, it's about growing up and growing old as well, inshallah. So make sure that you do attend live and share the link with your friends and family. It's been a pleasure to have you all with us, and inshallah, we'll see you guys very soon. For now, stay happy, stay healthy, stay safe, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone.